You want stuff. That's it. That's the whole video. Thanks for watching. Okay, fine. Let's actually do this. You want stuff. Other people have stuff. And somewhere between your wallet and their product, something magical and invisible and slightly evil is happening. It's called supply and demand. And it controls literally everything. The price of your coffee, the rent you're crying about, why PS5s were $900 on eBay in 2021, why eggs cost more than your dignity in 2023. All of it, supply and demand, running the show, silently, ruthlessly, without caring about your feelings even a little bit. And here's the thing, most people think they understand it. Oh yeah, supply and demand. More demand means higher prices. Got it. Cool. You understand about 4% of it. Today we're doing the other 96. All of it, fast, let's go. Let's start with you. Specifically, you wanting things. You wake up, you want coffee. Not because coffee is objectively necessary for human survival, even though your body disagrees violently every morning. You want it because it makes you feel like a functional person instead of a feral raccoon in a hoodie. That want? That's the beginning of demand. But here's where economics gets picky. Wanting something isn't demand. Wanting something and being willing to pay for it? That's demand, because a 5-year-old wants a Ferrari. That is not demand, that is a dream. Economics doesn't care about dreams. Economics cares about money. So demand is the amount of a good or service that consumers are willing and able to buy at a given price during a given period of time. Ride that again. Willing and able. Both, at the same time. This matters a lot and we'll come back to it. Now here's where it gets interesting. Demand isn't just one number, it's a whole relationship between price and quantity. And that relationship has a rule. A law, actually, the law of demand. When price goes up, quantity demanded goes down. When price goes down, quantity demanded goes up. Everything else being equal. That last part, everything else being equal, is called Ceteris Paribus. It's Latin. Economists love Latin. It makes them feel smart. What it means is we're only changing one thing at a time, price, and watching what happens to quantity. We'll break that rule later. Don't worry. So why does demand follow this law? Why do people buy less when prices go up? 3 reasons. And they all live in your brain. Reason 1, the substitution effect. If coffee gets expensive, you switch to tea, or sad water, or just suffering. When the price of something rises, cheaper alternatives start looking really attractive. You substitute, hence substitution. Reason 2, the income effect. When price rises, your purchasing power drops. You're not actually poorer, but you feel poorer. Your same income now buys less stuff. So you buy less, not because you want to, because math is undefeated. Reason 3, the law of diminishing marginal utility. Big phrase, simple idea. The more of something you consume, the less satisfying each additional unit becomes. Your first slice of pizza? Incredible. Your 4th? Fine. Your 7th? You hate yourself and the pizza equally. So you're willing to pay less for each additional slice, which means lower prices are needed to convince you to keep buying. 3 reasons. Same conclusion, higher prices. Less buying, lower prices, more buying. That's the law of demand, written in stone, enforced by human psychology. Now, economists love drawing this, and honestly fair enough because it's actually useful. Picture a graph. Horizontal axis is quantity, how much people buy. Vertical axis is price, how much it costs. The demand curve is a line that slopes downward from left to right, because as price goes up, quantity goes down. Law of demand. Remember? Each point on that line represents a question. At this price, how much would people buy? And the line answers it for every possible price simultaneously. This line is called the demand curve. Even though it's usually drawn as a straight line, economists call it a curve anyway. Nobody knows why. We've all accepted it. Now here's the important bit. There are 2 completely different things that can happen on this graph, and people confuse them constantly. And that confusion leads to embarrassing economics conversations at dinner parties. So pay attention. Thing 1, movement along the demand curve. This happens when price changes. Price goes up, you move up the curve, less quantity. Price goes down, you move down the curve, more quantity. The curve itself doesn't move, you move along it. This is called a change in quantity demanded. Thing 2, a shift of the entire demand curve. This happens when something other than price changes. The whole line moves left or right. More demand at every price, curve shifts right. Less demand at every price, curve shifts left. This is called a change in demand. Different thing. Very different thing. So what moves the whole curve? What makes demand itself go up or down, regardless of price? 5 things. Memorize these. 1, income. People make more money, they buy more stuff. Normal goods like restaurants and new clothes see demand go up when income rises. But here's the weird one. Some goods, called inferior goods, see demand go down when income rises. Because when you make more money, you stop buying instant noodles and start buying actual food. Instant noodles are an inferior good, not because they're bad. Well, they're a little bad, but because demand for them falls when income rises. 2. Prices of related goods. This splits into 2 categories: substitutes and complements. Substitutes are goods you can swap for each other. Butter and margarine, Coke and Pepsi, Netflix and not sleeping. If the price of Coke rises, demand for Pepsi goes up, because people switch. Complements are goods used together: peanut butter and jelly, Netflix and popcorn, printers and ink. If the price of printers falls, demand for ink goes up, because more people have printers. Clever 3. Tastes and preferences. If something becomes trendy, demand goes up. If it becomes uncool, demand craters. Fidget spinners, NFTs. Avocado toast before and after. Every food influencer on earth declared it their personality. Taste change. Demand follows. 4. Expectations. If you think the price of something is going up tomorrow, you buy more of it today. If you think it's going down, you wait. This is why people panic buy before hurricanes, and why Black Friday creates humans willing to elbow strangers for a television. 5. Number of buyers. More people in the market means more demand. Simple. Population grows. Demand for housing goes up. More teenagers get jobs. Demand for overpriced energy drinks goes up. More buyers, more demand. Every time, that's demand. Want meets wallet meets psychology. Now let's flip it. Now we look at the other side. Not consumers, producers. The people making the stuff. Supply is the amount of a good or service that producers are willing and able to offer for sale at a given price during a given period of time. Notice it's the same structure as demand, willing and able, but from the other direction, and supply also has a law, the law of supply, and it goes in the opposite direction from demand. When price goes up, quantity supplied goes up. When price goes down, quantity supplied goes down. Why? Because producers are motivated by profit. Higher prices mean more profit per unit. More profit means more incentive to produce, so they make more. Simple, beautiful, slightly greedy, but that's capitalism for you. Pizza place selling pizza for $5. Fine, making enough to pay the bills. Price goes to $15. Suddenly they're opening 2 more locations, buying a 3rd oven, hiring their cousin. Because the incentive got bigger, that's supply. It slopes upward on a graph. Price rises, quantity supplied rises. The opposite of demand. What shifts the supply curve? Just like demand, supply can shift left or right based on things other than price. 6 big ones. 1. Input costs. To make something, you need inputs. Labor, raw materials, energy. If those get more expensive, producing the good becomes more expensive, so producers supply less at every price. Supply curve shifts left. If inputs get cheaper, supply increases. Curve shifts right. This is why oil prices affect the price of almost everything. Oil is an input for shipping. Shipping is an input for everything. 2. Technology. Better technology means producing more efficiently. Same inputs, more output. Supply increases. Curve shifts right. The invention of the combine harvester didn't just change farming. It changed the price of food across the entire planet. Technology is a supply superpower. 3. Number of sellers. More companies making the same product means more supply. When smartphone manufacturing expanded globally, supply of phones exploded. Prices fell. You now have a supercomputer in your pocket for $300. Supply went up. Curve shifted right. 4. Government policies. Taxes on production increase costs. Supply decreases. Subsidies reduce costs. Supply increases. Regulations can go either way. A new safety regulation adds costs. Supply falls. A subsidy for electric vehicles reduces cost for producers. Supply rises. 5. Expectations. If producers expect prices to rise in the future, they might hold back supply now. Wait for the higher price. If they expect prices to fall, they rush to sell now. Expectations manipulate supply just like they manipulate demand. 6. Prices of related goods in production. If a farmer can grow corn or soybeans on the same land, and corn prices rise dramatically, they'll grow more corn and less soybeans. Supply of soybeans falls, not because of anything happening in the soybean market, but because the opportunity cost of growing soybeans just went up. This is how markets ripple into each other in ways that are genuinely fascinating and also slightly terrifying. Okay, you have demand. Slopes down, you have supply. Slopes up, now put them on the same graph. They intersect. That intersection point is called equilibrium. And equilibrium is where economics gets genuinely beautiful. At the equilibrium price, the quantity that consumers want to buy exactly equals the quantity that producers want to sell. No surplus, no shortage. Everyone who wants to buy at that price finds a seller. Everyone who wants to sell at that price finds a buyer. Perfect. Clean. satisfying in a way that almost nothing else in life is. This price is called the market clearing price because it clears the market, leaves nobody waiting, nobody stuck with unsold inventory, nobody going home empty-handed. But equilibrium isn't permanent. It's a balance point, and that balance shifts constantly. Let's say demand increases. Demand curve shifts right. At the old price, there's now more quantity demanded than quantity supplied. That's a shortage, shelves empty. People want more than exists. What happens? Prices rise. Rising prices do two things simultaneously. They reduce quantity demanded, and they increase quantity supplied, until a new equilibrium is reached. Higher price, higher quantity. New balance. Now let's say supply decreases. Supply curve shifts left. At the old price, there's less quantity supplied than demanded. Again, shortage. Prices rise, demand falls. Supply is already low, but producers now have stronger incentive. New equilibrium, higher price, lower quantity. These adjustments happen automatically. No central planner required, no committee deciding the price of eggs. Just millions of individual decisions by buyers and sellers, all responding to price signals, collectively finding balance. This is what Adam Smith called the invisible hand. It's not magic. It's just math and incentives running in parallel at massive scale. Real markets are not textbook markets. Real markets are messy and irrational and occasionally on fire. Let's talk about the ways things go sideways. Price ceilings. This is when the government says, this product cannot be sold above this price. Usually done with good intentions. Rent control is the classic example. Government says landlords cannot charge more than X for an apartment. Goal, keep housing affordable. Result in the short term, rents stay low. People can afford apartments. Great. Result in the long term, disaster. Here's why. If landlords can't charge market price, the return on investment for building new apartments shrinks, so fewer apartments get built. Existing landlords let their buildings deteriorate because the profit isn't there to justify maintenance. Supply decreases. Demand, meanwhile, is still high because prices are artificially low. Massive shortage. The very problem rent control tried to solve gets worse. The road to economic hell is paved with price ceilings, pre-floors. Opposite direction. Government says, this product cannot be sold below this price. Minimum wage is the most famous example. Floor set above equilibrium means price is artificially high. Employers want to hire less labor at higher wages. Workers want to work more at higher wages. Surplus of labor, that's unemployment. Again, good intentions. Complex outcomes, elasticity. Here's something demand and supply both have in common. They respond to price changes. But they don't all respond equally. Some respond a lot. Some barely move. That responsiveness is called elasticity. Price elasticity of demand measures how much quantity demanded changes when price changes. Elastic demand means a small price change causes a big change in quantity demanded. Inelastic demand means price changes barely affect how much people buy. What makes demand elastic or inelastic? A few things have availability of substitutes. Lots of substitutes equals elastic. If one brand of sparkling water raises prices, you switch instantly. Few substitutes equals inelastic. Insulin has no substitute. Diabetics pay whatever it costs. This is why pharmaceutical pricing is ethically complicated and economically straightforward. Inelastic demand plus monopoly equals unlimited pricing power. Necessity versus luxury. Necessities are inelastic. You buy electricity even when it's expensive, because the alternative is sitting in the dark. Luxuries are elastic. Vacation packages, restaurant meals, designer bags. Price goes up, people delay, skip. Substitute. Demand drops hard. Time horizon. Demand becomes more elastic over time. Short term, you're stuck. Gas prices spike. You still drive to work tomorrow. Long term, you buy a more fuel-efficient car, move closer to work, take public transit. Demand adjusts. Just slowly. Supply is also elastic or inelastic. If producers can ramp up production quickly in response to higher prices, supply is elastic. If production takes a long time to scale, supply is inelastic. Agriculture is a great example of inelastic supply. You can't grow more wheat overnight. It takes a whole season. So when demand spikes suddenly, supply can't respond immediately. Prices spike hard. Then next season, farmers plant more wheat. Supply catches up, prices fall back down. This cycle is called the Cobweb model, and it explains why commodity prices are so volatile. Let's apply all of this to something real, because theory without application is just expensive napkin math. Example 1. Why did PS5s cost $900 on eBay in 2021? Sony releases PS5. Massive demand. Years of hype. Supply extremely limited because of global semiconductor shortages. Chip factories couldn't produce enough. Supply curve slammed left. Demand curve was already far right. Equilibrium price? Astronomically high. Sony selling at fixed retail price created a massive shortage. Scalpers bought at retail, sold at equilibrium, made money. Everyone else was furious. That's supply and demand. Example 2. Why did egg prices spike in 2023? Bird flu wiped out over 50 million egg-laying hens in the US. Supply of eggs collapsed. Supply curve shifted hard left. Demand for eggs didn't change much. Eggs are a necessity. Inelastic demand. Result? Price spike of over 60% in some regions. People paid because they had to. Eventually flocks were rebuilt. Supply recovered. Prices fell. Classic supply shock. Example 3. Uber surge pricing. You're standing outside a concert at midnight. Rain is pouring. Everyone needs a ride. Demand for rides just spiked massively. Supply of drivers hasn't changed yet. Shortage. So Uber raises prices automatically. Two things happen. Some passengers decide to wait, reducing demand. Some drivers, seeing the higher rates, go online, increasing supply, new equilibrium, rides available. Faster than any other system could manage. You pay more, but you get home. That's the market working exactly as described, whether you like it or not. Supply and demand isn't just an economics concept. It's a description of how the world allocates scarce resources without a central authority making every decision. It's imperfect. Markets fail. Externalities exist. Information is asymmetric. Power is unequal. We'll save all of that for another video, but the core mechanism? Remarkably elegant. Producers chase profit. Consumers chase value. Prices are the signal that coordinates both. No meetings required. No permission needed. Just billions of individual decisions, each made selfishly, collectively producing something that kind of works. Scarcity creates competition. Competition creates price signals. Price signals create incentives. Incentives create behavior. Behavior creates outcomes. Sometimes good, sometimes catastrophic, but always traceable back to this same engine. You wanted to understand supply and demand like a 5-year-old. Here's the 5-year-old version. If everyone wants the toy and there's only one left, whoever pays the most gets it. Price goes up.
Done.
The rest of this video was just explaining why that's true, in what ways it breaks down, and why economists have been arguing about the details for 300 years. Now you know.